5 years ago, I sat in a marble cold law office and watched my entire world burn. The lawyer's voice echoed like a verdict. $2.1 billion to Margaret Hayes and the failing Carter dynamics to her daughter, Emily Carter. My stepmother smirked. My stepbrother laughed. They expected me to crumble under the weight of a dying company drowning in debt. They expected me to disappear. Instead, I rebuilt everything they tried to bury me with, brick by brick, deal by deal. Now, Carter Dynamics stands taller than ever, strong, profitable, untouchable. I thought I had finally outrun the past. I thought the dead stayed dead. But last night at 12:30 a.m., someone pounded on my penthouse door. When I opened it, rain poured in, and so did a ghost. A trembling man, soaked, broken, and carrying a truth powerful enough to destroy everything I rebuilt. My father, the man I buried 5 years ago. I still remember the smell of that room, the sharp sting of leather, old paper, and something colder, metallic, like the taste of betrayal before it hits your tongue. I was 26, sitting at the far end of a long mahogany table, hands pressed together so tightly my knuckles turned white. Across from me, my stepmother, Margaret Hayes, lounged comfortably in a white blazer that probably cost more than my yearly salary. Next to her, her son, my stepbrother, Dylan, scrolled through his phone, smirking like he already knew how the story would end. The lawyer, Patrick Grant, cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" Margaret didn't look at me. She didn't have to. I could feel her satisfaction radiating across the table like a spotlight. Patrick opened the folder. "This is the last will and testament of Jonathan Carter, my father." My heartbeat stuttered once. He continued reading the preamble, dates, signatures, legal jargon, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the moment the room fell silent, the moment his voice shifted. "To my wife, Margaret Hayes Carter, I leave all liquid assets, all real estate properties, all investment portfolios and trusts for a total value of," he paused, "approximately $2.1 billion. Dylan whistled under his breath, grinning. Margaret's lips twitched upward so slightly only someone who despised her as I did would notice. Patrick cleared his throat again. "And to my daughter, Emily Carter." I lifted my chin. "Here it comes. I leave full ownership of Carter Dynamics, including all liabilities, all outstanding debts, all pending lawsuits, and all remaining operational responsibilities." Silence. Then Dylan burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Dad actually did it. He dumped the corpse on you." Margaret placed a manicured hand over his arm, but her eyes were locked on mine. Cold, victorious, merciless. "You're lucky, Emily," she said softly. "You always wanted responsibility." "That company is weeks away from bankruptcy," Dylan added. "Even vultures don't want it." I swallowed, my throat burning. It felt unreal, surreal, like watching someone else lose their life. Patrick asked, "Do you have any questions, Miss Carter?" "Yes. Why? Why would my father do this? Why would he hand them billions and leave me with a sinking ship?" But my voice refused to come out. My father was dead. The answers died with him. So instead, I rose to my feet, pushed my chair back, and said the only thing I could force past my lips. "No, I'm done here." Behind me, I heard Margaret's whisper, soft, poisonous. "She won't last a month." Outside, the air was cold, the sky gray, rain starting to fall in thin, cold needles. I stood on the courthouse steps with my hands trembling, my entire world collapsing inward. But collapse didn't mean surrender. I wiped my face, lifted my chin, and whispered to myself, "If you want me to drown, you should have thrown me into deeper water." And I walked away alone, humiliated, furious. But with the decision burning inside me so bright it hurt, I would rebuild what they tried to bury me with. I would turn that dying company into an empire. And one day, they would regret every laugh, every sneer, every word. They thought the will destroyed me, but that was the day I began to rise. 2 days after the will reading, I stood in front of the rusted iron gates of Carter Dynamics, the inheritance they dumped on me like a joke. The wind smelled like wet metal and old smoke. The company's sign, once bold and polished, now hung crooked with half the letters missing. A security guard squinted at me. "You're Miss Carter?" I nodded. He hesitated. "Ma'am, I thought, well, Margaret said you wouldn't show up." Of course she did. Inside the building was worse than I imagined. The lights flickered, half the production line was shut down, papers covered the floors, phones rang endlessly with no one answering. 2 workers shouted in Spanish about missing payroll. A shattered coffee pot lay on the ground. This wasn't a company. It was a graveyard wearing a badge. A woman in her 50s, hair frizzy with stress, rushed towards me. "Miss Carter, I didn't know you were visiting. I'm Laura, the operations manager. I'm so sorry for the chaos." "It's fine," I said. Though nothing was fine. She laughed bitterly. "No, it's not. 3 executives quit last week, 2 lawsuits came in yesterday, and the bank called again this morning." Perfect. Exactly what Margaret and Dylan wanted. I entered the boardroom where 5 remaining board members sat gloomy like mourners. The oldest, Mr. Rowan, sighed deeply. "Emily, I'm sorry. Your father was a great man, but this company is finished. The best thing you can do is file for controlled bankruptcy. Preserve your dignity." "My dignity?" I repeated quietly. Rowan nodded. "There's no saving this place." I took a breath. A long, sharp, painful breath. "No," I said. "We're not filing anything." Rowan looked stunned. "Emily, this company isn't dead," I said firmly. "It's drowning, yes, but drowning means it's still alive. We're going to pull it back." A younger board member scoffed. "With what money? With what staff? With what miracle?" I didn't have answers. Not yet, but I had willpower and a fury that could burn cities. "I'm staying. Resign now if you want, but I'm fighting." Laura stared at me with open eyes. Rowan exhaled slowly. No one resigned. Not yet. By noon, I was touring the production floor. Machines covered in dust, workers leaning on walls, exhausted, unsure whether to stay. A man approached me, mid-30s, grease on his hands, tired but sharp-eyed. "Miss Carter, I'm Carlos Medina, senior engineer." He extended his hand. I shook it. "How bad is it, Carlos?" He didn't sugarcoat. "We're weeks from shutting down. Parts are outdated, clients don't trust us anymore." But he paused, and then said something no one else dared to say. "If someone actually gave a damn, this place could rise again." I stared at him. "You think so?" He shrugged. "Fire the lazy execs, replace the rotten suppliers, modernize the product. It'll take blood, sweat, and probably your sanity. But yes, it's salvageable." For the first time that day, hope flickered. "Carlos," I said softly, "I'm giving a damn." His lips twitched.
"Then I'm staying." By sunset, I moved into the office, literally. Slept on the old leather couch, ordered takeout, spread every financial sheet across the floor, and as the building emptied, as silence swallowed the halls, I whispered to myself, "They wanted me to drown. Fine, I'll learn to breathe underwater." And that night, while the world slept, I planned the resurrection of Carter Dynamics. 1 sleepless hour at a time. 3 months. That's how long it took for me to realize rebuilding a dying company wasn't just hard. It was war. War with competitors. War with the banks. War with exhaustion. War with myself. Every morning I woke up on that office couch with my neck stiff, my eyes burning, and a stack of bills waiting to strangle me before breakfast. Carlos, bless him, was always the first to arrive, sometimes before the sun rose. "Morning, boss," he said one day, carrying 2 coffees. "You look like you fought a dragon." "I did," I muttered. "It's called payroll." He snorted. "Payroll is easy. Wait till you see what the suppliers sent." He dropped a box of defective parts onto my desk. Cracked metal, cheap plastic, useless junk we were forced to use because it was all we could afford. I wanted to scream, but screaming doesn't rebuild companies. So I made calls, endless calls, days of negotiating, nights of reading contracts, begging banks for extensions, convincing suppliers to delay payments, trying to stop the company from bleeding faster than I could stitch. One afternoon, I sat in the conference room with the remaining board members. "We need funding," Rowan insisted. "Without investors, we'll be locked out of the market." "I know," I said, "but no one will invest in us." Another board member snapped. "We're radioactive." Radioactive. That word stuck. Fine. If no one wanted to touch us, I'd burn bright enough to force them to look. So I flew to New York with a backpack, my laptop, and a pitch deck that looked more like a prayer than a real proposal. The investment firm's receptionist looked at me like I didn't belong. Maybe I didn't. When the meeting finally started, 7 stone-faced investors stared at me across a glass table. One of them asked, "Why should we take a chance on a sinking ship?" I inhaled sharply. Then I spoke the truth. "Because I'm not asking you to save a company. I'm asking you to invest in a resurrection." I slid photos across the table of old machinery, of struggling workers, of the very heart of Carter Dynamics. This company was my father's, and I refused to let it die just because my stepmother wanted me erased. I'm not here for charity. I'm here to offer you the future. One investor scoffed. Another leaned back. But a third one, a woman in a navy blazer, tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Passion is great. But what makes you think you'll succeed where your father failed?" I met her eyes. "Because I don't have the luxury of failing." Silence fell. A long one. Then she said, "We'll give you a trial contract. 90 days. Impress us." I nearly sagged in relief. Back at the factory, when I told Carlos the news, he laughed out loud. "Oh, this is big, Emily. Huge!" "It's a chance," I said. "Nothing more." "Sometimes," he replied, "a chance is all a dying company needs." From that day, something changed. The workers saw the spark. The board stopped fighting me. Orders began to trickle in, small at first, then larger. I was still exhausted, still scared, still carrying the weight of an entire company on my shoulders. But for the first time since inheriting the ruins of Carter Dynamics, something warm bloomed inside me. Hope. Real, solid, dangerous hope. And hope is always the first step toward building an empire. By the end of the 3rd year, the factory didn't feel like a graveyard anymore. It breathed again. Machines hummed with purpose. Workers moved with energy instead of dread. Client emails shifted from threats to praise, and every financial report felt like a quiet victory. Carter Dynamics wasn't just surviving, it was rising. Fast. But success is loud, and loud things attract attention I never asked for. One Tuesday morning, I walked into my office and found the latest issue of Forbes on my desk. Carlos had circled a headline in red: "The young female CEO reviving a dying industry." He grinned. "You made it, boss." I snorted. "I made page 26, calm down." "It's still Forbes," he insisted. "What's next? Time magazine?" I rolled my eyes, but a small part of me glowed. That glow didn't last long, because fame is a double-edged knife, and mine sliced back fast. 3 days later, Dylan showed up. No call, no warning, he just strutted into my lobby in sunglasses and a custom suit like he owned the place. My receptionist nearly panicked. "Miss Carter, he says he's family." Unfortunately. He barged into my office without knocking. Typical Dylan. "Well, well, well," he said, scanning the room. "Look who learned to play CEO." I kept my voice steady. "Get out." "Relax, sis. I'm here to congratulate you." He wandered around touching things like he was inspecting property he planned to steal. "Margaret and I have been watching your little comeback." "Don't touch that," I snapped as he grabbed a prototype part. He smirked. "The press loves you. Investors love you. Even Dad would have loved seeing this. If he were alive. My stomach tightened. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. But don't forget, Emily, none of this changes the truth. What truth? I asked quietly. That you're still nothing without Dad's company, without the Carter name, without the pity inheritance he dumped on you. I stepped forward. Dylan, last I checked, you and the mother took billions. I took debt and turned it into a legacy. He blinked, surprised by my bluntness. Then his lips curled. You think this is a legacy? Look around. These are scraps compared to what we have. I smiled thinly. Then why are you here begging for attention in my office? His face reddened. I'm not begging. Then leave. For a moment, it looked like he might explode. Instead, he planted both hands on my desk, leaned in, and whispered, Be careful, Emily. Success makes enemies, even inside family. Then he walked out as abruptly as he came. Carlos entered seconds later. What was that tornado in a suit? Nothing, I said. A ghost of the past. But inside, I felt it. A shift. The beginning of a storm moving toward everything I had built. And I was right, because a week later, Carter Dynamics reached its biggest milestone yet. A record-breaking aerospace contract worth more money than I had ever imagined 5 years ago. Reporters swarmed the building. Headlines exploded. My inbox turned into a battleground.
And as I stood on stage accepting an industry award, flashes blinding my eyes, applause echoing around me, I felt something else. A chill. As if someone, somewhere, was watching. Not with pride, but with hunger. With resentment. With plans. I didn't know then, but that success, that spotlight, that moment of triumph, was the beginning of the darkest night of my life. The night everything shattered didn't begin dramatically. No thunder, no omen, no warning. Just silence. I had just finished reviewing quarterly reports, record-breaking numbers. The kind of results I used to dream about while sleeping on that cracked leather couch during those brutal first months. It was 12:30 a.m. I was alone in my penthouse, barefoot, hair tied up, sipping cold coffee and pretending it was wine. And then, bang, bang, bang. A violent knock hit the door so hard I froze. My first thought wasn't fear, just annoyance. Who the hell visits a CEO's penthouse past midnight? I set the mug down, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. At first I saw nothing but darkness. Then a face lifted. Soaked. Pale. Hollow. A man stood there, drenched from the storm, gripping the frame as if he would collapse. My lungs turned to stone. No. No, it couldn't be. My fingers moved on their own, unlocking every latch. When the door swung open, rain poured in like a wave, and so did he. His lips trembled, his clothes were torn, his eyes, those familiar, steel-gray eyes, stared into mine with desperate recognition. Emily! My girl. Please. I stepped back, shaking. No, you're dead. His knees buckled. I lunged forward, catching him before he hit the marble floor. His body was frighteningly light, trembling from cold and hunger. Dad. The word tore out of me. Dad. He squeezed my wrist weakly. It's me. I'm here. My chest collapsed inward. It was him. Jonathan Carter. My father. The man I buried 5 years ago. The name who's haunted every decision I made. The man I believed had abandoned me in the cruelest way possible. And he was alive. Alive and broken. I pulled him into the living room, wrapped him in blankets, and turned the heater to full blast. Sit here. Don't move. I'll get water and food. God, Dad, what happened to you? He drank with shaking hands, coughing between gulps.
His voice was a rasp. "Emily, forgive me. I didn't leave you." My hands froze. "What are you talking about? You died in a helicopter crash." He shook his head slowly. "No crash. No accident." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Then what happened?" He closed his eyes as if pulling the memory from a place soaked in pain. "They tried to kill me." Silence fell, a silence that screamed. "Who?" I whispered. He opened his eyes, sharp, terrified. "Margaret." My stomach twisted so violently I thought I would be sick. "Margaret? My stepmother?" "Dad, what are you saying?" "She drugged me. Said it was for stress. Strong sedatives. Every day. Made me weak, confused, helpless." My breath caught. The will. The missing clarity. The $1 billion transfer. Oh my God. He gripped my hand with surprising strength. She wanted the money. All of it. She forced me to sign things. I didn't understand what I was signing. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't fight her. He closed his eyes shut. The last thing I remember clearly. She said the pilot would take care of everything. Then darkness. And when I woke up, he swallowed hard. I was in a small cabin, hurt, disoriented. A stranger found me in the woods. He thought I was homeless, concussed. I couldn't remember anything, except fragments. I covered my mouth. "You were alive," I whispered. "Alone. And we buried an empty coffin." He nodded painfully. I tried to remember, tried to get back. But every time I pushed, my mind burned. Years passed. I wandered, worked odd jobs, living like a ghost. It was a nightmare. Tears blurred my vision. But 3 weeks ago, I saw you. I saw you on a TV in a diner, giving a speech. Strong, confident, my daughter, the CEO. And suddenly, like lightning, everything returned. Your face brought it all back. My throat tightened. "So you came here." I walked, hitchhiked, slept under bridges. I had no money, no ID, just the memory that my daughter was alive somewhere, and she needed the truth. I felt myself shaking, not from fear, but from rage. Rage so deep it burned beneath my skin. Margaret. Her smile. Her lies. Her $2.1 billion inheritance, built on poisoning my father, erasing me, and destroying him. His grip tightened, desperate. "Emily, Margaret won't stop. She thinks I'm dead. If she learns I'm alive, she'll finish what she started." I rose, fists clenched. "No," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "She won't touch you again." He looked up, hopeful and terrified all at once. "What are you going to do?" I stared at the storm outside, lightning cracking across the windows. "Dad, I rebuilt the company they tried to bury me with." I turned back to him, my voice turning to steel. "Now, I'm going to destroy the lies they built their empire on." The morning after my father collapsed into my arms, I woke with fire inside me. Not fear, not panic, purpose. Margaret tried to kill my father. She stole $2.1 billion.
She erased me from his life and nearly erased him from existence. I wasn't going to the police empty-handed. I needed evidence. Real evidence. Strong enough to burn her entire empire to the ground. So I started with the person most likely to know something. The family doctor. I found Dr. Harrison at his private clinic in Palo Alto. His face paled the moment I stepped inside. "Miss Carter," he said, standing too quickly and knocking over a pen cup. I wasn't expecting—" "Good," I said, closing the door behind me. "Because I'm not here for pleasantries." He swallowed. "What is this about?" I placed a photo on his desk. My father, the night he returned, bones visible, eyes hollow. The doctor froze. "You told us he died in a helicopter crash," I said quietly. "But here he is, alive." He collapsed into his chair, color draining from his face. "I didn't know, Emily." "Stop lying." My voice turned to ice. "For 5 years, you overprescribed sedatives to a man who didn't need them. Why?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Then, finally, a whisper. "Your stepmother. She told me to." I leaned closer. "She paid you?" He nodded, trembling. "She said your father was overwhelmed, that he needed something stronger to sleep. When I hesitated, she threatened to ruin me." I pulled a folder from my bag and dropped it onto his lap. "Then you won't mind giving me every prescription record, every dosage increase, every note she ever sent you." The doctor winced. "If she finds out—" "She won't," I said, "because you're going to give me everything, right now." He stared at the door, then at me, then slowly nodded. 20 minutes later, I walked out with a full file. Documents, prescription logs, Margaret's handwritten notes, every dosage increase perfectly aligned with the time my father began losing clarity. It was a start, but I needed more. Next, I tracked down someone my stepmother never expected I'd find, her ex-assistant, Olivia Gux. Olivia opened the door of her small apartment wearing sweatpants and suspicion. "Emily Carter?" she asked. "If you're here about Margaret, I swear I haven't worked for that woman in years." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here." Her eyes softened, and she stepped aside to let me in. The moment I sat down, she said the words I'd hoped for. "I always knew something was off, especially with your father." My heart pounded. "What do you know?" She hesitated, then whispered. "Margaret told me to hide medication bottles, destroy messages. She said it was just to protect Jonathan's image, but once I saw her mix something into his tea before board meetings." "What did you do with the bottles you hid?" I asked. She stood, walked to her closet, pulled out a dusty shoebox and handed it to me. Inside were empty sedative bottles and half-full ones, all prescribed to my father, each beyond any legal dosage. My breath caught. This could put her in prison. Olivia nodded grimly. "I kept them because I always feared she'd get away with whatever she was doing." I took her hand. "You did the right thing." We agreed she would give a sworn statement. But the real breakthrough came that night. I was going through the documents again when Carlos knocked on my office door. "Boss," he said, holding his phone, "you need to see this." A video played, Dylan at a private club, drunk, loud, his voice slurred but clear. "Dad didn't just die. Mom made sure he'd never come back. All that money is ours." My blood went cold. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "Anonymous email," he said. "Whoever sent it wants your step-family destroyed." I played it again and again. Proof. Real proof. The pieces slammed together.
Dad's sedation, the staged crash, the forged will, the stolen billions. Margaret and Dylan had built their empire on attempted murder and manipulation, and now I had everything I needed to take them down. I closed my laptop, exhaled slowly, and said, "Carlos, yeah? Prepare yourself for what's coming." I looked up, eyes brimming. For war. The day of the shareholders' meeting felt like the calm before an execution. The Fairmont Hotel ballroom glowed with chandeliers, expensive suits, and the electric buzz of reporters waiting for blood. They weren't here for business. They were here for a spectacle, and Margaret planned to give them one. I entered through the side corridor with Carlos at my shoulder and my father hidden in a private waiting room guarded by two ex-military security men. My hands shook despite everything, not from fear, but from anticipation. Today, the truth would finally rise from the dead. When I stepped onto the stage, hundreds of eyes locked on me. Flashes, whispers. "Is that Emily Carter? She looks nervous. She's going to lose the company today." Margaret stood across from me, draped in a navy designer suit, hair flawless, smile venomous. Dylan lounged beside her, pretending to be bored, but I saw the tension in his jaw. The interim chair tapped the mic. "We're here to address the legitimacy of leadership at Carter Dynamics." Margaret cut him off. "Actually," she said sweetly, stepping forward, "I'd like to begin." Of course she would. She took center stage, holding the mic like a queen about to condemn someone to death. "Ladies and gentlemen, I come to you not only as a major shareholder, but as the widow of Jonathan Carter." Murmurs. "As many of you have seen, my stepdaughter Emily has been spreading outrageous lies about me, claims of manipulation, fraud, and even attempted murder." She pressed a hand dramatically to her chest. "It's absurd. She's grasping at straws because she knows she is not the rightful heir to Carter Dynamics." My fingers curled into fists. "She has fabricated evidence, including forged medical records and doctored videos." A reporter raised a hand. "Mrs. Hayes, what about the allegations of overprescribed sedatives?" Margaret smiled politely. "Jonathan Carter was under the care of licensed medical professionals. Anything else is a desperate act by a young woman terrified of losing power." Dylan leaned into the mic. "Emily's just angry Dad didn't trust her. Now she's trying to rewrite his death for sympathy. It's pathetic." The room buzzed. Gasps, scribbling reporters, whispering shareholders. My pulse roared in my ears. I stepped forward. "That's enough." Margaret turned, smiling like a wolf. "Oh, you finally want to speak, dear." I held her gaze. "Yes. But first, let's clear one thing up." I nodded subtly toward the back of the room.
The ballroom doors slammed open. Gasps erupted instantly, one shockwave rolling across the room. My father stepped inside, alive, walking slowly, supported by a cane, thinner, older, haunted, but undeniably alive. The room exploded. "Is that Jonathan Carter? He's alive? Call security. What is happening?" Margaret went white, truly white, as if a ghost had crawled straight out of the underworld. Dylan stumbled back, knocking into a chair. No, this isn't real. You died." My father approached the stage, breath trembling but voice steady. "I'm alive," he said into the mic, "and I'm here to tell the truth." The room fell into a perfect, terrified silence. He looked at Margaret, not with anger, but with the grief of a man betrayed by the person he trusted most. "You drugged me," he said quietly. "You manipulated me into signing documents I could barely read. You isolated me, weakened me, and planned my death." Margaret's breath hitched. "Jonathan, please don't—" He snapped, the sharpness slicing the air. Then I stepped in. I opened my laptop and hit play. Screens lit up around the ballroom. Every monitor, every projector lit up with the prescription logs, Margaret's handwriting, Dr. Harrison's confession, Olivia's statement, and then the final blow. Dylan's drunken admission. Mom made sure Dad would never come back. The room erupted into violent outrage.
"You monster!" someone shouted at Margaret. "Arrest them! They tried to kill Carter. This is criminal!" Margaret's mask shattered. She clutched Dylan's arm, trembling uncontrollably. "Dylan, say something! Do something!" But Dylan was collapsing inward, panic written all over his face. We're being set up. Emily's framing us. This is fake. It's all fake." My father stepped closer. "No," he said softly. "The only fake thing here was the life you two tried to build on my grave." The room detonated with applause. Fierce, furious, vindicated applause. Margaret dropped to her knees, sobbing. Dylan backed away in horror as shareholders surged forward, demanding they be removed. Security grabbed them by the arms. As they were dragged past me, Margaret hissed, "This isn't over." I met her eyes. "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." And for the first time in 5 years, I felt the weight of my father's absence finally begin to lift. 3 weeks after the shareholders' meeting, the world felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. Like the air right after a storm that nearly tore everything apart. But the storm was over. The courts ruled swiftly. My father's death certificate was nullified. The will was invalidated. Every asset Margaret and Dylan had stolen was frozen, then reclaimed. The last time I saw them was outside the courthouse. Margaret in a wrinkled coat, makeup smudged from crying, begging her lawyer for a miracle. Dylan pacing like a trapped animal, muttering to himself. They didn't look rich or powerful or invincible. They looked small. Their empire collapsed immediately. Partners cut ties. Banks demanded repayment. Reporters followed them like vultures. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel hatred toward them, just emptiness. My father spent the next few weeks adjusting to life again. A real life, not the ghost state he had survived in for years. He stayed with me in the penthouse. The first morning, he made tea and burnt it so badly that the smoke alarm went off. I laughed harder than I had in years. He smiled sheepishly. "It'll take time to remember how to be normal." I touched his arm. "We'll take that time together." Sometimes I found him staring out the window at the city lights, eyes heavy with guilt. "I should have protected you, Emily. I failed." I shook my head. "You didn't fail. You survived, and you came back." He swallowed hard. "You deserved better." Maybe I did. But I wasn't that girl anymore. The one crying on courthouse steps while Margaret and Dylan laughed. I had built something stronger than money or revenge. I had built myself. Work at Carter Dynamics changed after that. The board no longer treated me like a young executive trying her luck. They treated me as what I had become, a leader. My name wasn't an afterthought anymore. It was a headline, a force. But late at night, when the city quieted and the adrenaline faded, I realized something. My victory wasn't destroying Margaret. It wasn't reclaiming billions. It wasn't even saving the company. My victory was choosing peace over hatred, rebuilding not just an empire, but a life, a family of 2 people who had been broken and found their way back to each other. One evening, as I wheeled my father onto the balcony to watch the sunset over the bay, he squeezed my hand gently. "Emily," he said, voice thick with emotion, "you saved me." I smiled softly. "No," I whispered, "we saved each other." The sun dipped behind the skyline, painting gold over the city I had fought to rise in, a city that once swallowed me, now bowing quietly at my feet. And as my father leaned his head on my shoulder, I realized they tried to bury me with a dying company, but all they did was plant a woman who refused to stay underground.